I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, we cannot move past this period in politics until we move past tactics that are meant to vilify and label. Plus, a local school district warns of budget cuts despite unbelievable spending, and UDub reacts to reports of a transgender athlete who was given a volleyball scholarship. That and more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. I'm Brandi Kruse. I want to tell you a tale on the show today, a story that goes back 2 years, and a story that I believe perfectly sums up what's wrong with our political discourse and what's wrong with one-party rule in the state of Washington. A story that I hope inspires you to reject politics and politicians who use labels to vilify you, who use labels to divide us. When I started this show 2 years ago, I hadn't really advocated for policy publicly prior to that. And that makes sense, right? I was in mainstream news. It wasn't my job to advocate for or against policy. And so really the very first time I did that was 2 months into this show back in December of 2021. And it's because a bill came up that I thought was so egregious, so bad, that I had to use my platform to advocate against it. And if you've been a fan of Undivided for a long time, you will recall this fight very well. The bill, which had been pre-filed ahead of the 2022 legislative session, was House Bill 1692. It was introduced by Representative Tara Simmons, and House Bill 1692's only mission was to reduce the punishment for drive-by shooters who killed someone. The bill's stated purpose was to promote racial equity in the criminal legal system by eliminating drive-by shooting as a basis for elevating murder in the first degree to aggravated murder in the first degree. In layman's terms, what that means is that just the act of committing a drive-by shooting and killing someone did not mean that that would be an aggravated murder. Under Washington state law, there are a list of aggravating factors where a homicide is considered so sick, so horrible, that the person who perpetrated it had such a disregard for human life that they would spend the rest of their lives in prison for aggravated murder with no possibility of early release. Now, the reason drive-by shooting is on that list, in my mind, is because if you're committing a drive-by shooting, you're spraying bullets into a neighborhood with maybe a target in mind, driving in a car 30 miles an hour, that you have no regard for who those bullets could hit. Innocent or your intended target, maybe a fellow gang member. And at the time that this bill was pre-filed and that I came out in opposition to it, and many of you emailed your lawmakers to express your opposition to it, I tried to tell the story of what the consequences of this bill would be from any angle I could. I talked about cases I'd covered personally when I was a crime and justice reporter, about innocent people who'd been killed in drive-by shootings, about a 1-year-old girl who took a bullet to the head in the South End, a bullet that was meant for her dad, about a office worker in Burien who was shot and killed by a bullet from the gun of a drive-by shooter that went through the wall at her office. I talked about how misguided it was, given the rising crime crisis, to be proposing a bill like that seemed to prioritize the worst of the worst criminals. I not only talked about it on this show, about why this was such bad policy, but I reached out to other outlets to see if they would also be willing to platform my arguments against it. The Seattle Times, back in December of 2021, published an op-ed from me where I told the story of a 19-year-old man named Corey Pittman, who was home from college on break in a car full of friends on Tacoma's hilltop when 19 bullets tore through their car and killed him. The bullets were fired by a man named Camonte Carter, who had mistook this car for a rival gang member. And of course, he was wrong. Shot 19 rounds through it. Car full of innocent college kids. Ended Corey Pittman's life at the age of 19. Someone who'd written in his high school yearbook that his goal in life was to help his community. He wanted to be a lawyer. Life ended just like that. On this show in December 2021, again, in efforts to push back against a misguided policy, a misguided prioritization of dangerous criminals, we had on Corey Pittman's brother, Damien, who read for us the statement that he read to a judge back in 1997 when his brother's killer was sentenced.
When my brother was killed, I didn't just lose a brother. When my brother was killed, I lost a brother, a best friend, and a role model. It was just a phone call for some advice, asking to send me clothes, or just calling to say I loved him. I knew that whatever hardships life brought on, as long as my brother was there, everything would work out fine. But now, that's been taken away from me. I sometimes feel like I can't go on. So much was taken from me in one night. I still have dreams that my brother's alive. And when I wake up, I realize it was all a dream. I just feel like crying until I can't cry anymore. Sometimes I feel myself not wanting to be around people who have a brother to turn to because it hurts me deeply. Just realizing I used to have what they have, and I never will. Had that satisfaction of saying, me and my brother again, unless I'm speaking the past tense. Words can't express the way I felt with my brother, nor can words express the deep feelings of hurt that I have been forced to carry with for the rest of my life.
Our coverage of this issue was factual. It was emotional. My opposition to that House bill was specifically rooted in policy and outcomes. It was focused on what this would mean for victims. It was focused on why this was a backward approach to the criminal justice system. We focused on all aspects of that bill. There's one thing that I did not do in December of 2021. Even though this bill was so bad, was so dangerous, even though the bill had such a disregard for people like Corey Pittman and his family that have lived with that loss for 20 years, there is one thing I did not do. I did not make it personal. I did not, in opposing that bill, attack the sponsor of that bill, Tara Simmons, which I easily could have done, which many other talking heads in my position have done, which many people on the right have done. Because Representative Tara Simmons used to be incarcerated herself before turning her life around and becoming a state lawmaker. In fact, what we believe to be the first formerly incarcerated person to represent the people of Washington at the People's House. Not only did I not make it personal, I have defended Representative Tara Simmons when people have attacked her for her background. I have praised Representative Tara Simmons for what she has done with her life, even if I do not agree with her policy. I have never and did not make this personal. You can read the coverage of it for yourself. You can watch the coverage of it for yourself. I focused on the facts, which is why I was so deeply disappointed to see 2 years later what Representative Tara Simmons posted on her Facebook page yesterday. It was a post that was meant just for friends, but one of her friends was apparently so taken aback by it that they sent it to us. Tara Simmons wrote, "It's crazy how my life has changed. When getting ready for a vacation before, my worries were confined to identifiable luggage tags. Now I have to worry about hurricane film on my windows and ensuring my security system is tight for the house sitters. As I get ready to introduce a significant sentencing reform bill this week that I hope will help people receive a second look, I remember how prior to our last Christmas vacation, I dropped a bill to help my friend, Kamonte Carter. Tucker Carlson and Brandi Kruse had fun stirring up the white nationalists and insurrectionists. So much so that my kids were called the N-word and my assistants were receiving death threats on my life in their personal social media accounts. I wasn't scared from Mexico, but as my time to go home approached, I was pretty spooked. This world has gone mad, but fortunately, I know my higher power is protecting me, and if I die, then I went out proud, and the impact I've made for so many people." And if you didn't know, Kamonte came home and is an incredibly valuable member of our community. So 2 years later, after we were successful in making sure that that bill was dead on arrival, by the time we were done talking about that bill and the failed policy and how it forgot victims, even other Democrats in Olympia said they would not consider it, that it would not get a hearing. 2 years later, how does Representative Tara Simmons, as she prepares to apparently introduce another sentencing reform bill, how does she characterize our coverage of that issue? Our coverage of that issue that was never personal, that defended her against personal attacks. She characterizes the pushback that misguided bill received as being my efforts to spin up white supremacists and insurrectionists. Is Damian Pittman, Corey Pittman's black brother, is he a white supremacist representative? Because he was pretty spun up. He was pretty upset. Is he an insurrectionist? Or is he a Washingtonian who still lives locally, who is still upset by the loss of his brother, who didn't want to see his brother's killer walk out of prison early when his 19-year-old brother never got to have a life? Is he a white supremacist? Is he an insurrectionist? Representative, what about your Democratic colleagues that said that your bill went too far 2 years ago? Are they white supremacists? Are they insurrectionists? And this is a common tactic that I have seen used a lot on the left, which is something they do, something they say, some sort of policy they propose gets reasonable pushback and criticism. And they claim immediately that they're being attacked, that they're getting death threats, that they think their lives are in danger, as a way to try to quell that criticism, as a way to try to get to ignore that criticism and feel bad for them. Now, if Representative Tara Simmons truly had staff members who were receiving death threats on their personal social media, and if her kids were truly being called the N-word, I mean, that's horrible. But that doesn't change, nor would it have changed anything I said on this show, anything I wrote in the Seattle Times, because I never make things personal, unlike you. I stuck it to policy disagreements, unlike you. And I would ask you, Representative Tara Simmons, if you think that people like me disagreeing with your policy puts your life at risk, puts your kids' life at risk, puts your staff lives at risk, what impact do you think it has when you take to your social media and you call me a white supremacist and an insurrectionist. Do you think that that helps to make this mad world of ours a little more sane? No, you're doing exactly what you're wrongly accusing me of doing. You're using labels to vilify. You're using labels to distract from your own policy shortcomings. And you're making things personal when I never did. And when I defended you. And when I defended your background. And when I said how proud I was that someone with your background could turn their lives around and do what you're doing now, even if I don't agree with your policy. And this tactic of vilifying, of labeling, of name-calling, we see it replicated everywhere in Washington state by Democrats. We see it happening right now by the Washington State Democratic Party and by progressive groups against Washingtonians who are out signing initiatives so they can vote on some policies that are impacting their lives. And if they dare to sign those initiatives, they're MAGA, they're right-wing. They hate poor people. They hate the environment. Because what? They want to keep a little more of their own money. They want their communities to be safe. But it's easier to vilify them and to label them and to fearmonger than it is to listen to them about how your policies are impacting their lives. You know, it might have changed since the last time I spoke to him, but Damian Pittman reached out to Representative Tara Simmons after she proposed that bill. Do you think he heard back? No, not before the legislative session, at least. So you want to put things forth, you want to, vilify Washingtonians who don't agree with you, but you don't want to listen to them. You don't want to listen to how it impacts their lives. Clearly, you didn't want to listen to my detailed, factual pushback against this bill. You just wanted to make it about, white supremacists and insurrectionists, which is funny because if you listen to this show and know my disdain for Donald Trump, I don't think we have an awful lot of insurrectionists who listen to this show, Representative. And as a state, until our elected leaders move on from what has become an increasing pattern of the labeling, of the vilification, and of the name calling of their citizens, of the people they're supposed to represent, for what? The crime of disagreeing with them? This political environment cannot improve. It will not change. And unfortunately, I think the only way to get them to change their behavior and to get them to stop utilizing tactics like this that vilify you is to make sure that they lose their jobs. And I hate to say it, Representative Tara Simmons, because again, I have been so impressed by what you've done with your life. I have family members who have criminal histories. I don't think any less of them today because of it. But when you behave like this, when you vilify entire swaths of your constituency for the crime of disagreeing with you, maybe Olympia is not the place for you. All right, coming up next, we're going to have a trifecta of some local stories, follow-ups to stories that we've covered on the show before. But first, we've been talking about these strict landlord-tenant laws that are just finding their little tentacles outside of Seattle. Started in Seattle, now Tacoma. Voters passed some really strict landlord restrictions to protect tenants. Wes Jones of sellwithwes.com says the result has been less available, affordable rental housing.
Since 2019, Seattle has lost over 11,000 rental units.
Wow, yeah.
This is important. This is something, those are less rental units on the market. Majority of those, Brandi, they're not crappy little apartments. Mm-hmm. Those are single family homes. That is the cream of the crop when it comes to, rental inventory. Those are not being sold to other investors. Those they don't pencil anymore. Somebody's had that for 10, 15, 20 years, and that's going to go to somebody who is going to move, into the city. Mm-hmm. That is out of the rental pool. That is gone.
Yeah, and so the same thing that we saw happen in Seattle is very likely to happen in Tacoma. In fact, Wes Jones has some rental units in Tacoma, not a lot, but a handful, and he's got to consider, do I sell those before these strict protections go into place that could leave someone stuck with someone who's not paying rent and no income coming in? So if that's something that you're kind of mulling over, maybe you're a small mom and pop landlord and you're thinking, do I sell my unit? Reach out to our friend Wes Jones, sellwithwes.com. He can talk you through the state of the market, give you a free market analysis. You can also use their free home value calculator on their website to find out how much your property might be worth if you do decide to sell. Sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, a narrative that we've been tracking is what's happening with our juvenile detention facilities in Washington state. I really do believe that there needs to be a full-fledged investigation into how they're being run. And look, I do believe that juvenile offenders need to be treated differently. I do. And in fact, this is something Tara Simmons and I agree on. She doesn't believe that, and there was a Supreme Court ruling on this, which is why Camonte Carter eventually got out, which when you look at life sentences without parole for juvenile offenders, I don't think if you're under the age of 18 that you should be sentenced to life without parole. I just don't. No matter how egregious the crime, I think that there ought to be an opportunity at some point in your future to prove that you've been rehabilitated. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to get out, but I think a life sentence for someone whose brain isn't fully formed is a little troublesome. So she and I agree on that. And I do think that when you have a juvenile offender who is likely going to get back out into society at some point sooner rather than later, we need to be laser focused on trying to figure out, okay, what went wrong? How do we get them back on track? How do we make sure that they are productive in their life? So I don't disagree with that sentiment. However, you have juveniles who commit very serious crimes. You have juveniles who kill people. And you have to combine the efforts to reduce recidivism with good security. And that is not happening. We've seen now a bevy of stories, and I'll give a lot of credit to King 5 News for their coverage of this issue. Am I becoming a King 5 News fan? What's happened to me? Is this real life? No, I've been doing a lot of good investigative stuff lately, so I want to give them credit where credit is due. But, they talked about what was happening down in Chehalis at the Green Hills School, which is a juvenile detention facility. And, Chehalis police try to get in to investigate what they have ample evidence of, which is drug trafficking in the facility, possibly relationships between guards and inmates, etc. And the state of Washington and Governor Jay Inslee's like, no need to investigate that. These cops have to get a search warrant to serve, to go in and search a state-run juvie center when they have evidence of crime. Just wild stuff. And then, of course, you have Echo Glen. Oh, Echo Glen. You've had multiple violent escapes from Echo Glen, which is in Snoqualmie, right? I think it's in Snoqualmie. So this has been a pattern over the past few years of not just one of these juveniles escaping or two, but groups of juveniles who overpower guards, who assault guards, and who escape. And typically among the bunch is at least one, if not two, convicted killers. And then you got communities that go on lockdown. And so there's a pattern here of, having juvenile facilities that are not secure. And when you're housing killers, even if they're under the age of 18, there has to be proper security protocols in place. So King 5 News had a follow-up. Remember the, not the one that happened earlier this month, but the one that happened, I believe it was the very end of last year or early this year. It was May, right? May. So there was an escape from Echo Glen, and it was violent. And now King 5 News has gotten its hands on some of the surveillance video from inside Echo Glen that shows a brutal assault on a sole, there's only one in there, female staffer. Let's play part of this King 5 report.
It all started in May on the graveyard shift.
Kids have escaped and assaulted a staff member.
Kruse, in the black shirt, was supervising teenagers with violent criminal backgrounds. Alone. Here she is going room by room to make sure the 14 inmates in her unit are accounted for and asleep. But she doesn't know there are two boys hiding behind her in the bathroom.
And I hear feet running at me. And he starts freaking pummeling me. Just punch after punch after punch.
One of her attackers heads to the common area to use a staff computer, which is completely unsecured, with just the touch of a screen.
He was letting all the kids out.
He unlocks inmates' cells and releases 5 more boys. As the boys come out, the other attacker drags her across the unit.
And he was just leading me with my arms.
The inmates steal her belongings, her car keys, her cell phone. Some change out of their clothes. And then The inmates forcefully shove and lock Kruse into one of their cells.
Of course, at this point, I was crying because I was by myself.
One of the inmates shouts through the cell window.
He asked me what my passcode to my cell phone was.
He's a convicted murderer who also escaped from Echo Glen the year before in nearly the same way.
Insane. I mean, heartbreaking to watch what they did to that woman. The callousness. And these might be kids, but they're just as violent as adults. They have no regard for the sanctity of life. They have no regard for authority. They've committed crimes that are as serious as adult crimes. Yet you've got one female staffer in there. You've got a computer that's completely unsecured, that they can hit one button and open up all the doors to let these kids out. And Governor Jay Inslee's last response to someone saying, hey, you and the Attorney General need to investigate these things was, we've got it under control. We've improved training for staff. What's stopping them from taking a closer look at the Department of Children, Youth, and Families and how they're running these facilities? If you were the governor of Washington State, wouldn't you say, hey, DCYF, what the hell is going on? Multiple brutal escapes of murderers from one juvenile detention facility, drug running in another juvenile detention facility. I would fire everyone who had anything to do with it, whose job it was to keep these secure. It's insane to me, and it's because of wokeness. That is what it is. It is because there is this environment, especially on the progressive left, of no youth jail, of treating youth offenders, regardless of the how heinous their crime is, differently. Kid gloves. Kid gloves on people who didn't use kid gloves on their victims, who didn't use kid gloves on that guard, and I use the phrase guard very loosely. So look, by all means, this shouldn't be controversial. Make sure these kids are getting help. Make sure that we are identifying during the time that they're incarcerated what led them down the wrong path, what can be done. Do they have any mental health issues? Do they have substance abuse issues? Do they have issues in the home? Let's fight through that. Let's get them back on track by all means. I'm not opposed to that. No one is opposed to that. But you have to make sure in the meantime that the rest of us are protected from them. And that's really not too much to ask. All right, another follow-up, this to the initiative gathering effort that's going on, and I just had to show a picture quick because people were tagging me in it. Costco is not liking these initiative gatherers, the signature gatherers. So we told you about my saga at Costco on Sunday night, which we're still waiting to hear back from the Issaquah Police Department. We're still waiting to hear back from Costco, although I did hear, Nicole, the next day, the signature gatherers were back at that Costco, whether Costco wanted them there or not, which is a whole nother conversation. But I got sent this picture, and I want to read the Facebook post. Show the picture, Nicole. So this is just crazy. At the Costco in Gig Harbor, a woman tagged me in this post and said, come on, Costco, be better. If people want to sign these petitions, why are you blocking them from doing so? Because one or two people didn't want to sign them and complained. Even the police showed up and let her stay there. So what the pictures show is one of these signature gatherers, and someone has surrounded her with rows of carts, completely blocked her off with rows of carts. Now, the person who posted it said Costco did this. We have reached out to Costco, and when they get back to us on our first request from 2 days ago, we will also add this request. Because at that point, no one's going to come up to her. She's completely surrounded by carts. This is a joke. And I'll also say again to Costco, you should be supporting these initiatives. They're common sense. Make communities safer. Reduce unfair and illegal taxation. You should definitely want your club members to have more money in their pocket to be able to spend at your store. If Mike and I were saving money on gas, you know where we'd spend it? Probably Costco. Although now I'm starting to rethink that. What's the alternative to Costco? Sam's Club, do you guys have those here?
Cash and carry,
Yeah.
which isn't cash and carry
No,
anymore, whatever
man.
the name is now.
And I get it. We had this conversation on the show yesterday. I do think there's a debate to be had about private business and private property. and whether they should be able to dictate who's on there or not. The law's tricky on this. Costco, unfortunately for Costco, has allowed other signature gathering. And so law basically says, well, you can't pick and choose. You've made yourself a town square for this kind of stuff. So we can have that debate, but really carts around the lady. Carts around the lady. That's crazy. Keep sending those pics in because I've got just a lot of stuff. And we're still tracking this woman who we are not going to name yet as we continue to try to reach out to her. We found a social media profile that was somebody of the same name, and we reached out to them because they kind of look similar, and they're like, that's not me. And then we found out that's not them. So we're trying to find this person's best actual contact. Does that make sense? We want to give them a chance to explain themselves. We know who it is. I can't find a social media profile for them. We know where they live. So we're working on it, okay? We're trying to be fair about how we go about this. We don't want to taint any sort of investigation. If Issaquah Police ever gets back to us, anyway, we're working on it. Okay, in another follow-up, remember we talked about yesterday how the head of Sound Transit is resigning to go take care of her ailing father, which is totally fine, except they gave her this big payout. They're covering a year's salary and benefits. She was only there for 16 months, and she made a decision to leave. Why are you giving her hundreds of thousands of dollars to leave her job early after 16 months? Wild. So now, what do we find out? The head of the Washington State ferry system is resigning as well. Like, what's going on here? And part of me is like, gosh, is this people just getting out before we have a new governor because they think, I don't know, I don't know. So head of Washington State Ferries, Patty Robstello, to step down. It says she leaves the department at a time, this is from the Times, of great uncertainty for the ferry system. Crumbling boats and thin staffing have reduced sailings and made service unpredictable. Only 75% of crossings were on time last quarter, well off the goal of 95%, and the fleet regularly bottomed out at just 13 of 21 boats in use, depriving 4 routes of a ferry they're expected to have. And look, the only reason I'm putting a pin in this, if they give her a payout, I swear to God. I mean, look, it sounds like the Sound Transit head, they liked her performance. She just had to leave early for personal reasons. I still don't think that's a reason to pay out. But if someone who ran a crumbling state agency that has been an utter failure gets a payout, I will lose my ever-loving mind. So let's put a pin in that, and we'll stay tuned for what sort of departure agreement there's going to be there. All right, coming up in Unbelievable, the Olympia School District is warning that they have a severe budget shortfall, except they're spending money on some really questionable stuff. We'll dive into the numbers with help from our friend Alicia Perkins. But first, I've been talking about my success on the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic plan, eastsideweightloscclinic.com, down 37 pounds, lost most of that in just 2 months. And yeah, I've been up and down a few pounds here and there, but I've been pretty good at staying within this 5-pound range of where I cut my weight to. And that's because the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic maintenance plan is really easy to follow. Once you get down to where you want to be, you don't feel like you're on some lifelong diet. You know you have the tools you need to be able to be successful and not have this crazy yo-yo that I'd experienced in the past, but you also get to go out and enjoy life. And yeah, I was talking on the show yesterday how I went to a fun Chinese restaurant, and it's now my favorite restaurant in the world. So to me, the difference with the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic program is it's not a perpetual diet. It teaches you what to eat in the right portions so you can drop weight quickly, and then it gives you structure to be able to live your life in a way where you're not going to gain all that weight back if you follow the program. So do what I did, do what so many of our viewers and listeners have done. Reach out to Dr. Ryan Coogan and his team at eastsideweightloscclinic.com. Schedule a free 15-minute consultation. Take your life back, man. Cut some weight. A lot of people on the program lose 20 to 30 pounds in about a month or two. So if you've got something big coming up and you're thinking, gosh, I got to get some of this weight off, now is a great time to start. All right, Olympia says it is considering closing a couple schools because they're broke. The problem is they're spending an awful lot of money on stuff that's woke. Let's get to it in our segment, Unbelievable. Thanks, Nicole. Nicole's... I rhymed broke with woke, and Nicole's over there going, well done. Like, that's the best thing I've done all day. Good job, Brandi. So this story comes from our friend Alicia Perkins, who runs a blog called OSD Rescue on Substack. I highly recommend you check it out. But all of our good stories we get on the Olympia School District usually originate with documents that Alicia Perkins dug up. So thank you, Alicia Perkins, our Olympia correspondent extraordinaire. So the Olympia School District, and we've heard this from other school districts, oh, we have no money. And it's because a lot of school districts got temporary funds, spent it on stuff that isn't a temporary cost, and then they're like, what are we going to do? Olympia School District, no different.
Yeah, they just assumed that the legislature would give them more money last year.
Yeah. Oh, no, this is called budgeting. We all have to do it. Welcome. So this is from the Olympia School Board puts forward plan to close Madison, McKinney elementary schools. The proposal to close the two schools was made by board member Scott Cliffhorn, who said he originally had 5 schools in mind to consolidate to make up for the $3.5 million looming deficit. His original plan included Madison, McKinney, LP Brown, and Boston Harbor elementary schools, plus Reeves Middle School. First of all, $3.5 million in terms of the government cog and what we spend on education, you have to close 2 schools in order to make up for a $3.5 million gap. You give me your budget. Bring it on over. I will, in 10 seconds, find you ways to cut $3.5 million. I guarantee you. And maybe we can start with the $200,000 that you spent making bathrooms gender neutral. This is from Alicia Perkins, who got she got a public disclosure request with some information on a proposal for Capitol High School gender neutral restrooms. The entity that they contracted this with to do the work gave them an estimate of $161,900 plus Washington state sales tax to take a perfectly functional boys' restroom, remodel it, reconstruct, engineer, design, testing. What do you need to test? Inspection and taxes.
You have to pay for that?
Yeah. What are you gonna do? You want me to go in and test it? Like, I can go in there and take a pee? Is that all you need to do? I don't get it. So that happened in April of 2023. They spent $200,000, and I'll show you a picture of the restrooms momentarily, but I also just want to note that also in April of 2023, remember, the board decided to slash funding for 4th grade band. And there were 2 parts to that. They said 4th grade band and wind instruments were racist, but they also said they had a budget deficit. So they're spending $200,000 remodeling a boys' bathroom into an all-gender restroom, and then they're also at the same time slashing 4th grade band, and now they're crying poverty. Which, hey, I gotta say though, seeing the pictures of this all-gender restroom, I appreciate that the doors touch at the top and bottom.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a gender
No, I
thing.
want that everywhere I go in public.
Yes.
I don't want you looking at my feet while I go to the bathroom, okay? I want some level of privacy.
It also has a little sound barrier, gives it a little bit of a sound barrier, and that's always nice.
Yeah, because I'm a little pee shy.
Oh, I'm very pee shy.
You are. I can go, and we got into pee talk on the show. If I know you, then it's fine. I got no problems. But in a public restroom, I'm kind of like, So anyway, absolutely ridiculous. Then at the same time that all of this is happening, they're crying poverty, they're cutting 4th grade racist wind instruments, they're spending $200,000 on gender neutral bathrooms while they say we've got to close 2 elementary schools. They're giving themselves raises and also spending money on really unnecessary training. Alicia says, while everyone was focused on dismantling systems, teachers received a permanent across-the-board 5.5% pay increase with temporary funding. The Knox Administrative Building continued to bloat, and in June 2023, administration received a 3.7% pay increase as well. Superintendent Patrick Murphy received a salary increase to $263,000 for the 2023-2024 school year. That's a $27,000 pay increase from his previous salary. It also does not include monthly mileage pay of $300, benefits, blah, blah, blah. At the same time, she writes, our board inexplicably added expenses like a $57,000 earmark for anti-ableist training. Yes, $57,000 to challenge ableism.
Is that for the speaker or the person giving the lesson? Because, wow. That's quite the gig.
I will accept even less than that.
Yeah.
To teach you about not being ableist. Give me some of these government contracts. But yeah, if your kids go to Madison or McKinney elementary schools, you got to find a different elementary school for them to go to because, I mean, Olympia's got a lot of important stuff to spend money on, like gender-neutral bathrooms, like anti-ableist training, like raises for the superintendent and for faculty. So suck it up, parents. Just live with it. Thank you, Alicia. wealth of good stuff on Olympia. And make sure you check out her Substack, OSD Rescue. That has been unbelievable for today. All right, we've been talking about the state of the economy, indicators. If you're close to retirement, I bet that this is a very anxiety-inducing time. You're hearing all these things, you're feeling all these things about the economy. Maybe you've just got a little bit longer to go. Managing your risk right now is critical. One of the latest things that happened is the Fed decided to hold interest rates steady. And how did the stock market respond? Well, it went gangbusters. But Zach Abraham with Bulwark Capital says, don't let that fool you. That is just a temporary situation, and the Fed might have a specific motivation.
I think they are beginning to try to juice the economy going into the next election.
Yeah.
Right? The Fed can say whatever they want. They are an extension of the Biden re-election campaign. They are. Everybody's excited. Oh, yeah, the Fed's going to cut rates. It juiced stock market. Stock market was up 1.3% today. The 2-year bonds, the 2-year government bonds that we own that are paying us 5%, their value went up 2.9% today. Right? And this goes to our whole point of saying, hey, guys, you're all in there buying stocks at record valuations going into what looks like a recession, okay? Should be. And I think there's a lot more money to be made owning bonds with zero risk. It is one of the worst risk reward setups I have ever seen in my life, in my career, to go in there and buy stocks at these levels.
Yeah, and so there is a lot of risk in the market right now. So if you're close to retirement, man, don't leave yourself to the whim of this economy during a presidential election year. Make sure you're taking steps to manage your risk, to protect your hard-earned retirement. Check out Zach's weekly radio show, knowyourriskradio.com, where you can get all sorts of useful advice. And while you're at it, you can learn about Bulwark Capital Management's risk management strategy. That is what they specialize in. All right, dipping outside of Washington State, poor Mayor Eric Adams. I just think he's fried. I just think he's like, I lost my mind. Yes. The border crisis. Nothing's happening. This isn't what I thought it was going to be, because this answer from Eric Adams, I don't know why specifically I'm putting this on this show, but I was like, what did he just say? It's all over.
And this is what happens when things are this crazy.
So he is doing this end of the year kind of softball interview with the news, it seems like. And they throw this softball question at him about, how would you describe the year using one word, which I hate those questions as it is, but his answer was truly bizarre.
When you look at the totality of the year, if you had to describe it, and it's tough to do, in one word, what would that word be, and tell me why?
New York. This is a place where every day you wake up, you could experience everything from a plane crashing into our trade center to a person who's celebrating a new business that's open. This is a very, very complicated city, and that's why it's the greatest city on the globe.
I hate to laugh about anything 9/11 related. First of all, Mayor, New York is 2 words, so you didn't answer the question. But also, just any given day, we could, I don't know, see a plane crash into the World Trade Center, or somebody could be opening a new business. It's like,
come to New York.
Come to New York. Never mind that was, 22 years ago, and that certainly isn't happening every day.
Poor guy.
I just
He's lost it.
I will note, though, have you noticed how better I've gotten at not snorting?
Yes.
Previous Brandi would have snorted during that segment. But the snort jar has really helped. Because when you got to pay into the jar, you really are conscious about, I'm more conscious about not snorting.
It was something you could control to that extent. I thought it was kind of just one of your things.
Like, yeah, but I think when I'm mentally like, this is funny, don't snort, I've been doing great.
Yeah.
Wow.
Great job.
We need to continue the jar next year, and I'll come up with some other bad habit I have.
Okay.
And then, yeah.
I'm trying to think of one. I could probably come up with a couple.
I definitely have things I do that bother me. Some words I use too much.
Okay.
During interviews that bother me. I don't want to point them out, because then every single person on live chat will say, you just said it. So I'll come up with something.
Okay, deal.
All right. So this was a story that came out a couple days ago, but we wanted to do our due diligence on it a little bit before we talked about it. You might recall that there was a transgender athlete, biological boy, given a valuable volleyball scholarship to UDub. There are only so many of those they can give out, and they gave one for women's volleyball to a biological boy. And Riley Gaines, who is a former collegiate athlete who spoke out against the inclusion of biological men in female sports, she had, raised this whole big stir about it on social media. And then earlier this week, she had a follow-up. She tweeted, "It's alleged that UW volleyball rescinded the scholarship from the male vying to play with women. Sources say the coaches had no idea he was a male. He and his family concealed his sex throughout the entire recruiting process. This is the power of public opinion and accountability." And because she was saying alleged, and we hadn't seen it too many other places at the time, although now it seems like that story has been picked up, we just wanted to reach out to the University of Washington. They gave us a comment, although it's not much of a comment. I want to read it anyway. UW told us, "NCAA rules prohibit universities from commenting on any student athlete who has not signed a letter of intent, regardless of whether or not they're actually being actively recruited, even in instances where media reports or other individuals are making speculative claims." So that leads me to believe that this person has not signed a letter of intent, at least, because they're saying they haven't, so we can't comment on it. So there's a little bit that you can glean, but I haven't seen any reports disputing the claims from Riley Gaines and others that this biological male athlete is no longer being offered a scholarship from the University of Washington. And again, that's common sense. You can, as we talked about on the beginning of the show, you can call people who are opposed to that transphobes or whatever it is, but I just reject that. I just reject that notion that it is somehow hate-filled to suggest that someone who is biologically different should be given one of the very few scholarships for women athletes in a particular sport. So just to follow up on that. All right, we'll get to our daily show poll and subscriber comments from today coming up next. But first, if you're thinking about redoing your family budget, you got to save a little money. I mean, don't we all at this particular point in our economy? Maybe take another look at your insurance. And also in the process, not only could you save a little bit of money, but you could have First Mark Insurance handle your insurance for you. So you don't even have to worry about it. You're not on the phone with your big box carriers all the time. Mike and I took the First Mark Challenge back in the spring. They ended up finding us much better insurance for the same price. So it was a no-brainer. We're now members of the First Mark family. We never pay First Mark anything for their services. Dave Taylor is the CEO of First Mark, and he says a lot of people come to them really hoping to save money, but they end up staying because of the service that they provide.
We like to talk about there's three elements to a really healthy insurance program.
Yeah.
It's having the right coverage, it's having the right coverage at a competitive rate, and it's having the service behind it when you need it, right? So all three things are really important. However, people are bombarded with the message of price, right? So when people reach out to us, it's okay that they all pretty much reach out and say, hey, I want to see if I can save some money.
And can you do it in 15 minutes or less?
Yeah. And the answer is no.
No, we can't. Okay.
No.
Yeah, and I think it's neat that, again, you don't have to spend a dime with First Mark Insurance. If you do the First Mark Challenge, they could save you money, they could get you better insurance, or they could do both. You could walk away with better insurance, saving money, and a local company that's been doing this for a long time that's going to handle your insurance needs going forward. Every year, reevaluate your plans, see if they can save you money, see if you need different plans given how your life has changed. So it is really a no-brainer. Make some time in the new year to take the First Mark Challenge. FirstMarkInsurance.com, FirstMarkInsurance.com, they work for you. All right, coming up on the show later this week, we're going to discuss a bill that is creating a little bit of a rift in some conservative circles in Washington state. It has to do with artificial intelligence. So right now, there is a proposal to create a task force, a legislative task force, to look at how to regulate artificial intelligence. It is a bill that was requested by Attorney General Bob Ferguson, but it happens to have a Republican sponsor in Representative Travis Couture. So we're going to have the representative on this week to talk about why he's sponsoring this AI task force bill with Bob Ferguson, who I don't want anywhere near artificial intelligence ever. Anyway, ahead of that conversation, I wanted to make this the subject of our daily subscriber poll on Patreon and Locals, just to get a gauge for how you guys feel about this before we take on the issue. I said a proposed task force would study how to regulate artificial intelligence in Washington state. When it comes to AI, which would you like to see prioritized? Guardrails for citizens so they don't abuse AI? guardrails for the government so it doesn't abuse AI? Or do you value both of those things equally? So right now, most people in our poll are saying both are equally important, both having and creating guardrails to prevent citizens from abusing AI and creating guardrails to prevent the government from abusing AI. Now, I tend to think that the government is a little more important, just in my estimation. Maybe I'm a little too anti-government. I recognize that citizens abuse AI. I do recognize that. And you look at the bevy of ways that it could be abused, from creating fake videos that appear to be from a politician or a leader and they're not, and what kind of disaster that could sow in elections. So 100% you need guardrails and rules there. But on that side, to me, it's a little more whack-a-mole, because citizens are always going to be coming up with new ways to abuse AI. And then you're going to have rules that are specific to that. You're sort of like, okay, we got to knock that down. Whereas the government, I would really like to see pretty quickly some rules and guardrails put in place when it comes to the government's utilization of AI. I mean, there's already this effort out there from the Secretary of State's office using AI to sort of monitor social media accounts for anything that might be concerning election related. I don't particularly like that. I believe one of my tweets has been caught up in that, some other people who certainly aren't extremists. And so it's stuff like that where I'm like, man, I just don't trust the government. I certainly don't trust Attorney General Bob Ferguson with it. Christine Dana says, if you've ever watched the movie I, Robot, you would be as scared as I am about AI and its probable evolution. Oh, I'm terrified about AI. I mean, they've got like AI news hosts now. They're replacing news hosts with AI, which honestly, a lot of TV news people are just reading off prompters anyway. So if a robot can just read off the prompter and not think for themselves, I don't really see the issue with that. Daniel says, I would propose replacing politicians with an AI with direct feedback from their constituents. At least then you have something advocating for you instead of special interests, not to mention you don't have toothless laws made by incompetent people. Jim Bob. Hi, Jim Bob. As someone who actively uses AI and has worked for companies that are developing this technology, I am both excited and terrified of it. The banal aspects of it, helping you write text better, creating images and the like, are great and interesting. They are what the average person sees and perhaps even experiences. They can be used to enhance people's lives, but AI is already being used to curate what you see, what you are allowed to talk about, and you may not even be aware of how deep this goes. That's interesting, Jim Bob. I would love to hear your thoughts on this task force as it sort of develops, if it passes. Let's see if I've got any comments I want to read over on Locals really quick. Sorry, Locals isn't loading. Oh, I have to comment on it. Okay. One more. Greg Anderson says, government must always be controlled. There's no reason that government needs to be in the AI business, and they should be prevented from using it against the electorate. I agree. All right, some questions and comments before we get to our closing sanity check. On other aspects of the show, on Tara Simmons in our opening segment, Lancelot Dufresne says, basic human moral compass. It's essential. Exactly. And you're not a bad person when you disagree with someone. I mean, it doesn't inherently make you some evil sort of extremist because you don't agree with me or I don't agree with you. And that's why it's about not making it personal. I mean, Nicole, how many times on this show have we edited out personal attacks and comments?
Yes.
Remember
often.
when I got down on you for saying Bob looked schmarmy? Schmarmy.
Yeah.
I was like, Nicole, we can't do that. So it's about just trying to, there's so much to criticize there, right?
Right.
There's so much to criticize in the policies, in their priorities. You don't have to resort to personal attacks. Right. But I would argue that she can't criticize my opposition and the facts that we've brought, her leaving victims out of the equation when she proposes bills like that. So what does she do? When you cannot debate and win on the facts and the merits, then you resort to name calling. We don't have to do that because we can win on the facts and the merits of our debate and our ideas. And that's what we have to get back to.
Stirring up emotions.
All right, why don't you keep going, Nicole?
Let's see. Greg Anderson, criminals should be punished without regard to race, creed, color, and religion, or any other identifying label.
One would think. On the Costco fiasco, Mandy said, I would go up and sign around the lady with the carts. I signed the initiatives at Walmart, and now they have a sandwich board out talking about their commitment to distraction-free shopping. Yeah, yet you let people plow into your store on Black Friday and assault each other. Okay,
true.
Walmart.
I don't know that happens anymore. I think we're past that now.
I don't know. Walmart's not exactly what I'm trying to say. Like, they're not exactly the role model for this.
No.
Let me see.
Well, did you want to do? Are you moving on to
Police
Costco?
misconduct? Is that the word?
That's his name on
Police misconduct.
YouTube.
If Costco doesn't support the Constitution, why support Costco? I mean, you can make that decision. And again, I firmly believe in private property rights. I am also torn on this. But when you go with the law the way it is now, if you've opened yourself up as a town square, you don't get to pick and choose. And I would argue that surrounding a signature gatherer with carts is the equivalent of kicking them off the property, because it makes it really ineffective.
Don't you think that's likely one employee, like probably one of the guys or gals that goes and collects all the carts, and they just did that to be kind of a jerk?
I have no idea.
I doubt that was a corporate decision.
Well, I'm sure corporate's not like surround her with carts. Bring in the carts.
I actually think Costco, it seems to be, of course they didn't stay out of the alcohol thing because they were going to benefit from selling alcohol. Yeah. So I get that, or liquor. But in this case, I really think they're trying to stay out of it, but I don't know that you can. I think you have to come out and be like, this is who we support, or this is, we support the Constitution, we support this is why we're making that decision. And so, yeah, I think it's gotten to the point where they can't stay silent anymore. They need to make up their minds on this policy.
I agree, because what they're doing, that's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, either take the lumps and risk being sued to say you're not welcome here. And if those signature gatherers want to turn around and sue and their companies they work for, fine. If that's how you want to make your stake for your private property. But also, if you're going to be a company that says, look, we allow this kind of conduct, we're going to put a little tape around and this is their space and please don't harass them and they're doing their job. That is what I would prefer. I also think Costco, again, when you look at retailers in Washington State, and I've spoke to the Retail Association before, they are dealing with a lot related to crime, related to the business climate. They should be supporting some of these things and coming out and saying, hey, look, this is going to actually make business better for us. And so we're going to facilitate them being able to, collect signatures without putting carts around them. It's a little ridiculous. All right, on the ferry head resigning, Sharon Barber says, ferries are crumbling, crews are dwindling, arrivals not on time. Perfect time to quit. Yeah.
Pretty much.
It's only going to get worse, so that might be a great time.
Oh, you want me to go?
Yep.
On OSD, the Olympia School District, admin Scott J. I worked for the two school districts for a total of 15 years. They teach the staff to overspend so that they can get more money the next year. If they do not spend their budget, they'll get less.
Yep. And I heard these stories from my military friends.
A lot of.
They'll find whatever to dump the rest of that budget in, because God forbid next time budgeting comes around, they don't get as much money.
And that's most government.
Well, that has to be disincentivized. I mean, you really have to, if you care about that. And that's one of my primary issues when I look at why I'm supporting Dave Reichert in the governor's race, who is the only candidate I'm going to endorse for 2024. I'm not endorsing anyone else in any other races. I want it to be clear that I feel like this is the most important thing going on, is because there's not a lot you can do if you're a Republican governor on an island with a Democrat House and Senate. They're going to make life miserable for Dave Reichert. I mean, because they're going to lose, if they lose the governor's office for the first time in 40 years, you think Democrats are going to work with him to actually improve policy? No. But there are things he can do on his own. And I do hope that he can get some of the spending under control, that he can incentivize some of his appointees to find ways to save money. And heck, you find ways to save money, we'll look for ways to improve your salary, whatever, even if you have to incentivize in that way, that's fine, Okay, let me see here. TZ Burton says, my bathrooms in my house are gender neutral. My wife and guests just lock the door. I actually I've said this on the show before, I'm very passionate about this issue. I think every bathroom should be just a single bathroom.
I like it.
Yep. You get I don't know if that's more expensive. You get a whole wall, one bathroom, two bathroom, three, you just go in.
Well, it's more expensive if you put a
sink in there,
I guess. But I think why not?
I like it.
Christina, who I believe is Dory's best friend from from childhood.
Hi, Christina.
Says, how could a wind instrument be racist? Who comes up with these things? And I do think that's something. Who is coming up with this? I feel like somebody is sitting around saying, what could we make ridiculous today? Because it's out of control.
It is. Are we reading this Matt Gilbert super chat?
So he's threatening to do worse. So get this one out of the way and then.
You can read it then.
No.
You read
it's your turn.
Yeah, why are you doing this to us? I will give you your $5 back.
In women's volleyball, he's saying that there should only be one
ball on the court. Matt.
We know where you stand, Matthew.
All right, TZ Burton says Thailand and Philippines have transgender beauty pageants for transgender people. That's not so bad.
Which we've said before, I think maybe a swim competition for just transgender kids.
I mean, it's going to be a
people,
team
then that's fine.
Like one or two, but fine. Make it a team. We'll end with Trina Jones. Teachers will be replaced by government-programmed AI. Yeah, they're already government-programmed.
I was going to say.
Just flesh and blood.
They already are, but it's also not a bad idea to have somebody there, here, listen to this, and it's already been approved and done, and then teachers just help.
Programmed.
Help.
Yes.
With assignments.
All right. Good questions and comments from everyone but Matt Gilbert. All right. We'll move on to our closing sanity check. So, of course, there's a lot happening at Harvard and, debates around whether the president should resign and what really seems like it has been an allowance of anti-Semitism that wouldn't be, a level of hate that wouldn't be allowed in any other context. And it comes on the heels of this wokeification, really, of our higher education system, but Harvard's been guilty of that to a large extent. There is an email that's going around, and I'm just going to read it. It's from Harvard law professor Mark Ramsayer. He sent this email internally, but it was shared publicly by one of his colleagues with his permission. And this particular professor came to Harvard in 1998. So he's been there through quite a few seasons. And he's been there during all of this, like I said, kind of wokeification. And what he said is really poignant. And to me, it speaks to how we got to this place of ridiculousness on so many issues. Not just what's happening in higher education and education in general, but what's happening with these, anti-racist initiatives and DEI and the criminal justice system. I mean, his words are applicable to so many things. So I just want to read them. He wrote, Harvard is a vastly less tolerant place than it was when I arrived in 1998. The intolerance is a function of an increasingly large fraction of our colleagues. And we, the rest of us on the Harvard faculty, let it happen. The canceling, the punishments, the DEI bureaucracy, the DEI statements, the endless list that we could all recite, all of this happened on our watch. We saw it happen, but we did nothing. We were too busy. We were too scared to speak up. We on the faculty let Harvard become what it is. The Harvard that we have is the result of our own collective moral failure. The alumni who are furious are not trying to turn Harvard into something we do not want. They are trying to rescue Harvard from what we let it become. And I think if we take that sentiment and we apply it to what's happening across so many aspects of society right now, and we also do a personal inventory of whether we have allowed some of those things to happen with our silence and our hesitancy to speak up, our hesitancy to say what's true, our hesitancy to push back. And we do that personal accounting, and then we decide that we won't let it happen again. That's how we move out of this period that we're in. That has been your closing sanity check for today, and that has been today's episode of Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. We will be back here on the live show tomorrow at noon. Remember, if you would like to support our mission and our movement and our independent show, you can do that for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com.